At my daughter's school performance, not a single person applauded her act. The judges barely paid attention. I overheard a parent mutter, "That's the poor kid with the single mom." I fought back tears until a mysterious man rose from the back row and walked onto the stage, leaving the entire audience speechless. Hannah Morgan clutched her worn leather purse as she slipped into the back row of Springfield Elementary's auditorium. The annual talent showcase was already underway, with proud parents occupying the prime seats up front, smartphones ready to capture their children's moments of glory. Hannah's daughter Emma was scheduled to perform eighth, and the knot in her stomach tightened with each passing act. Unlike the other children, Emma would have no cheering section, just her exhausted mother who'd rushed from her second job, still wearing her waitress uniform partially hidden under a threadbare cardigan. The auditorium buzzed with casual conversation and occasional laughter. Hannah noticed the familiar cliques of PTA mothers with their perfect highlights and designer bags, huddled together in the center section. They hadn't even bothered to acknowledge her arrival. 3 years at this school, and Hannah remained invisible, the struggling single mother who couldn't volunteer for bake sales or chaperone field trips. The woman who couldn't afford the right clothes or drive the right car. Her daughter suffered the same quiet ostracism, rarely invited to birthday parties or playdates. Emma had practiced her violin piece for months, scraping together courage for this performance. The violin itself was a thrift store find that Hannah had splurged $300 to have professionally restored, money that should have gone toward their overdue electric bill. But Emma had shown such natural talent, such dedication. The music teacher had even suggested private lessons, oblivious to how impossible that financial burden would be. Instead, Emma learned from YouTube videos, practicing late into the night while Hannah worked evening shifts. Principal Wallace took the microphone, his voice booming with practiced enthusiasm, as he introduced a dance troupe, 5 girls in matching sparkly outfits whose parents had clearly spared no expense. They performed a flawless routine to thunderous applause. Hannah watched their mothers beaming in the front row, exchanging proud glances and taking videos with the latest iPhones. The knot in her stomach transformed into a familiar ache. The pain of knowing your child deserves the same opportunities but won't get them. 2 acts later, Wallace announced Emma's name. Hannah sat up straighter, trying to project confidence as her daughter walked onto the stage. Emma looked so small under the harsh spotlights, her second-hand dress freshly ironed but noticeably outdated. She tucked the violin under her chin with trembling hands. Hannah held her breath. This moment represented everything they'd sacrificed for. All those nights Emma had practiced, instead of watching TV or playing with friends. All those extra shifts Hannah had taken to afford new strings and sheet music. Emma drew her bow across the strings, and the opening notes of Vivaldi's Winter filled the auditorium. Hannah's chest swelled with pride. Her daughter played beautifully, with technical precision that belied her age and limited training. But around her, Hannah sensed restlessness. A man checked his watch. A woman scrolled through her phone. The judges at their table whispered among themselves, barely watching Emma's careful fingering and passionate expression. One judge actually yawned, covering her mouth without bothering to hide her disinterest. The cold realization washed over Hannah. They'd already decided. No matter how well Emma played, she wasn't part of their world. She wasn't worth their attention. Hannah glanced toward the judges' table where Patricia Holloway, the wealthy donor who chaired the school board, was now openly checking her emails. The other judges followed her lead, their indifference a clear signal. Hannah's hands clenched into fists as she fought against the burning in her eyes. She wouldn't cry. Not here. Not where they could see her weakness. Emma continued playing, her small face concentrated despite the audience's obvious disinterest. Then Hannah heard it, a whispered comment from the row in front of her. A woman in an expensive cashmere sweater leaned toward her friend. "That's the poor kid with the single mom. The one who works at Denny's." The words weren't meant to be cruel, merely factual, which somehow made them cut deeper. Hannah's throat constricted as she watched her daughter pour her heart into a performance that no one valued. Emma finished her piece with a technically difficult passage that she executed perfectly. A smattering of polite applause followed, nothing like the enthusiastic response the previous performers had received. Emma's eyes searched the crowd, landing on Hannah with a look that broke her mother's heart, hope mixed with a dawning recognition that something was wrong. Hannah clapped loudly, desperately trying to compensate for the lukewarm reception, but her lone enthusiasm only highlighted the room's collective indifference. As Emma left the stage, her shoulders slumped slightly. Hannah felt something inside her crumble. Every sacrifice, every extra shift, every dinner of ramen noodles so they could afford violin strings, all of it invalidated in 3 minutes of predetermined judgment. Hannah blinked rapidly, determined not to let her tears fall. She would be strong for Emma. She would tell her daughter how beautifully she had played, how proud she was. She would find a way to cushion this rejection. Movement at the back of the auditorium caught Hannah's attention. A tall man in a dark blazer had risen from his seat in the very last row. Hannah hadn't noticed him before. He seemed out of place among the Springfield elementary parents with his serious expression and slightly rumpled appearance. He walked down the center aisle with deliberate steps, ignoring the curious glances from the audience. Hannah watched, confused, as he approached the stage where the next performer, a young boy with a magic act, was being introduced. The man didn't stop. He walked directly onto the stage, interrupting Principal Wallace mid-sentence. A hush fell over the auditorium as the stranger took the microphone. Principal Wallace stepped back, too surprised to object. The man's voice, when he spoke, was deep and carried an authority that immediately commanded attention. "I apologize for the interruption, but I cannot remain silent after what I just witnessed." The audience froze. The PTA mothers exchanged glances. The judges finally looked up from their phones. Hannah's heart hammered in her chest as the stranger continued. "My name is Daniel Cooper. I'm the new director of the Springfield Symphony Orchestra, and I came here tonight because a colleague at Juilliard suggested I might find undiscovered talent in unexpected places." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the now attentive audience. "What I found instead was something deeply troubling." Daniel Cooper turned toward the wings where Emma stood, frozen in place. "Young lady, would you please return to the stage?" Emma looked uncertainly toward her mother. Hannah nodded encouragement despite her own confusion. Emma slowly walked back into the spotlight, clutching her violin like a shield. Cooper's expression softened as he addressed her directly. "That was Vivaldi's Winter from the Four Seasons, wasn't it? Would you mind playing the final passage once more?" Emma's eyes widened, but she positioned her violin and began to play. This time, with Cooper standing beside her, the audience was utterly silent, every eye fixed on the small girl and her instrument. The notes soared through the auditorium, pure and passionate. When Emma finished, Cooper turned back to the microphone. What this young musician just played would challenge violinists twice her age. Her technique shows remarkable discipline, but more importantly, she plays with soul, something that cannot be taught. Cooper's gaze hardened as it swept across the judges' table. Yet, while she performed, not one of you bothered to truly listen. You were too busy with your phones, your whispers, your prejudgments. You missed the extraordinary gift this child offered because you couldn't see past circumstances that have nothing to do with her talent. The auditorium remained deadly silent. Principal Wallace shifted uncomfortably. Patricia Holloway's face flushed dark red. "I came here tonight hoping to identify candidates for our youth orchestra program, which includes a full scholarship for private lessons and performance opportunities." Cooper turned back to Emma, his voice gentler. "Young lady, if you and your parent are interested, I'd like to offer you one of those scholarships. Based on what I heard tonight, you have the potential for a significant musical future." Emma's mouth fell open in shock. Hannah pressed her hand against her lips, unable to process what was happening. Cooper wasn't finished. He faced the audience again, his expression stern but measured. "Before I leave, I want to make something clear. True talent doesn't care about zip codes or bank accounts or family situations. It deserves respect and nurturing wherever it appears. What I witnessed tonight, the disregard, the dismissal, speaks volumes about this community's values." Several parents shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Patricia Holloway stared at her folded hands. To the young performers, still waiting backstage, you all deserve better than to be judged on anything other than your abilities and efforts. And to the adults in this room, children notice everything. They internalize the messages you send, both spoken and unspoken. Cooper placed the microphone back in its stand. The silence in the auditorium was absolute, heavy with collective shame. Then, from somewhere in the middle rows, a single person began to clap. Others joined, the applause building until it filled the space. Many people were looking at Emma now, really seeing her for the first time. Hannah sat stunned, tears flowing freely down her cheeks. 3 years of invisibility, of barely surviving, of watching her daughter's light slowly dimming under the weight of subtle exclusion, and in 5 minutes, this stranger had shattered the walls they'd faced. Emma stood on stage, her posture straightening as the applause continued. For the first time in years, Hannah saw something new in her daughter's expression. Not just hope, but vindication. After the showcase, Hannah and Emma waited near the exit as Cooper finished speaking with several other parents. When he approached them, his professional demeanor softened. "I meant what I said about the scholarship. Emma has exceptional talent that deserves proper training." Hannah swallowed the lump in her throat. "Why? Why did you speak up?" Cooper was quiet for a moment before answering. "Because 30 years ago, I was Emma, a kid with talent but without connections or resources. Someone stood up for me once. I promised myself I'd do the same if I ever had the chance." 3 months later, Emma performed with the Springfield Youth Symphony for the first time. Hannah sat in the audience, wearing a new dress she'd bought, with her first paycheck from her new administrative job at the symphony office, a position Cooper had helped her secure when he learned of her organizational skills and determination. As Emma played, Hannah noticed Principal Wallace and several teachers from Springfield Elementary in the audience, along with a few families they'd never interacted with before. After the performance, Patricia Holloway approached Hannah in the lobby, her expression uncomfortable but determined. "Your daughter plays beautifully. I've been thinking about what happened at the showcase. I was wrong. We were all wrong. I'd like to establish a proper art scholarship fund at Springfield Elementary, if you'd consider helping to organize it." Hannah studied the woman who had once dismissed her daughter without a second thought. 3 months ago, she might have responded with bitterness. Now she simply nodded. "I think that's an excellent idea. No child should have their potential limited by circumstances beyond their control." As Patricia walked away, Hannah felt a strange sense of completion. Sometimes it took just one person willing to speak truth to power to change not just one life, but an entire community's perspective. 5 years had passed since that fateful night at Springfield Elementary's talent showcase. Emma Morgan, now 16, stood in the wings of Carnegie Hall, her fingers lightly running over the polished wood of her violin. Not the thrift store find from her childhood, but a 19th-century Italian instrument on loan from the conservatory where she'd been accepted for pre-college training. Her mother, Hannah, stood nearby, elegant in a simple black dress, a far cry from the waitress uniform she'd once worn to school functions. "Are you nervous?" Hannah asked, noticing the slight tremor in her daughter's hands. Emma shook her head, her confidence genuine but tempered with humility. "Not nervous, just grateful." Through the curtain, they could hear the announcer introducing her as the youngest featured soloist in the Young Artist Showcase, a prestigious platform that had launched countless musical careers. Daniel Cooper, now the artistic director of a major symphony orchestra, approached them with a warm smile. His mentorship had evolved into a family friendship over the years, his belief in Emma never wavering even when she struggled with the increasing demands of her musical education. "They're ready for you, Emma. Remember what we talked about. This audience isn't judging you. They're here to experience the music through you." Emma nodded, taking a deep breath. As she walked onto the stage to enthusiastic applause, Hannah felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to find Patricia Holloway, immaculately dressed as always, but with a warmth in her eyes that had been absent 5 years ago. "She's going to be magnificent," Patricia said. "The scholarship fund has never had a better success story." The Springfield Elementary Arts Scholarship Fund, created in the wake of Daniel Cooper's intervention, had grown beyond anyone's expectations. What began as Patricia Holloway's attempt at redemption had transformed into a county-wide initiative supporting dozens of talented children from disadvantaged backgrounds. Hannah now served as its executive director, having discovered organizational talents she never knew she possessed. The program had changed Springfield Elementary itself. The school, once quietly segregated by social class, had developed a reputation for identifying and nurturing diverse talents. Principal Wallace, initially embarrassed by the talent show incident, had become one of the program's strongest advocates after seeing how it transformed his school's culture. As Emma played her solo piece, Hannah's mind drifted to the journey that had brought them here. The cramped apartment they'd once shared had been replaced by a modest but comfortable home, purchased with Hannah's salary and a first-time homebuyer program. The dining table where Emma had once practiced amid stacks of past-due bills now hosted dinner parties for friends from all walks of life: musicians, teachers, parents of Emma's fellow students, and community leaders. The cashmere sweater mother who had dismissed Emma as the poor kid with a single mom had apologized a few months after the showcase, her own daughter having benefited from Emma's generosity when they were paired for a school project. "Your daughter taught mine more about dignity than I ever could," she had admitted. Emma's performance ended to thunderous applause. Hannah felt tears forming, not of sorrow or frustration as they had been 5 years ago, but of pure pride. Her daughter took 3 careful bows, exactly as Daniel had taught her, before gesturing toward her former teacher in acknowledgement. Later, at the reception, Emma was surrounded by conservatory representatives and music critics, all eager to speak with the evening's standout performer. Hannah stood back, giving her daughter space to navigate this new world. She felt, rather than saw, Daniel Cooper approach. "Did you ever imagine this?" he asked quietly. Hannah smiled, watching Emma confidently engage with people who would help shape her future. "Not in my wildest dreams," she admitted. "I did," Daniel said simply. "The moment I heard her play Vivaldi. Talent like hers doesn't just happen. It was there because you made it possible. All those sacrifices, all those extra shifts." Hannah started to protest, but Daniel continued. "Do you know what the real change has been? Not just Emma's musical success. It's Springfield." He gestured toward the reception where several Springfield families mingled with the New York musical elite. Among them were 3 other young musicians who had received scholarships through the program Hannah now directed. "You've helped create a community where talent is recognized regardless of circumstances. That's a legacy beyond music." As they prepared to leave the reception, Emma broke away from a conversation with a Juilliard professor to join her mother. "Mom, Professor Winters wants to discuss early admission possibilities." Hannah smiled at her daughter's excitement, but noted the hint of hesitation in her eyes. "What's worrying you, sweetheart?" Emma glanced around the elegant reception hall before answering. "I was thinking about that night at school. How one moment changed everything. What if Mr. Cooper hadn't been there?" Hannah gently tucked a strand of hair behind Emma's ear, a gesture unchanged since her childhood. "But he was there. And now you're here, creating opportunities for others. That's how change happens. One person stands up, then another follows." Emma nodded, her expression resolving into determination. "I want to teach someday. Not just perform. I want to find other kids like me." Hannah felt her heart swell with a pride deeper than any applause could evoke. "You already are, Emma. Every time you play, you're showing someone what's possible."